The day my manager laughed while my coworkers applauded was the day he thought he had finally broken me. He pointed at my presentation, smirked, and said, "Emma, I've seen interns with more common sense." The room exploded with awkward laughter. Nobody knew that my phone, sitting face down beside my notebook, had just recorded every word. Nobody knew that one email, already waiting in my drafts, would eventually destroy the career he had spent 20 years building. But before that email could change everything, I had to survive the worst months of my life. I used to believe hard work always spoke for itself. I was the first person to arrive every morning and usually the last one to leave. My reports were always finished before the deadlines, clients regularly praised my attention to detail, and I genuinely loved my job. When I joined the company, I imagined growing there for years. I respected my manager, Daniel Carter, because everyone else did. They called him demanding, brilliant, and impossible to impress. I thought if I worked hard enough, one day he would appreciate me too. Instead, I became his favorite target. At first it seemed harmless. He would point out tiny mistakes during meetings while ignoring everyone else's. If a spreadsheet contained one misplaced number, he acted as if I had endangered the entire company. "Do I need to do your job for you?" he asked one morning. "No, sir. I'll fix it immediately. You should have fixed it before I noticed." I apologized, even though the mistake had been caused by another department. I convinced myself he was simply trying to make me better. Then the insults became personal. He criticized my clothes. He mocked my voice. He interrupted me every time I tried to explain myself. Whenever I presented an idea, he dismissed it within seconds. A week later he would present the exact same idea as his own, and everyone congratulated him for being innovative. The worst part wasn't Daniel. It was everyone else's silence. People avoided eye contact whenever he humiliated me. Some even laughed because they were afraid of becoming his next victim. Every evening I sat alone in my car before driving home, wondering what was wrong with me. I replayed every conversation in my head, searching for mistakes that justified the way he treated me. My mother called almost every night. "How's work, sweetheart?" "Busy," I always answered. "You sound tired." "Just a long day." I never admitted that I cried in the parking lot before going inside my apartment. I didn't want her worrying about me. 3 months later, the pressure became unbearable. Daniel assigned me 3 major projects with impossible deadlines while removing 2 experienced team members who normally helped me. "If you can't handle responsibility," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "maybe you're in the wrong profession." "I'll finish them," I replied quietly. He leaned closer. "I doubt that." For the next 2 weeks, I barely slept. I skipped meals. I worked through weekends. Somehow, against all odds, I completed every project on time. The clients loved them. Our department received one of the highest performance ratings of the year. During the celebration meeting, I expected Daniel to acknowledge my effort. Instead, he smiled at the executives and said, "The team deserves the credit." I had to personally correct several serious mistakes before these projects were ready. I stared at him in disbelief. Those mistakes never existed. Every sentence was a lie. The executives thanked him for his leadership while I sat there feeling invisible. That evening, my closest coworker, Olivia, quietly sat beside me in the break room. "You know he's lying," she whispered. "Then why doesn't anyone say anything?" She looked toward the hallway before answering. "Because HR protects him. He's close friends with the regional director." Her words hit me harder than Daniel's insults ever had. So this wasn't just bullying. It was a system that rewarded the wrong people and punished anyone who challenged them. A few days later, Daniel called me into his office. He closed the door. "You've been talking too much with Olivia." "We were discussing work." "No, you were discussing me." "I wasn't." He smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "Careful, Emma. Reputation is everything. One complaint from me, and nobody in this industry will hire you." For the first time, I felt genuine fear. He wasn't just trying to embarrass me anymore. He wanted control. When I left his office, my hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold my coffee. That night I couldn't sleep. Instead of crying, I opened my laptop. I reviewed every email Daniel had ever sent me. Something caught my attention. Several instructions he claimed he had never approved were sitting right there in writing. Every impossible deadline, every last-minute change, every order that he later blamed on me. I created a folder, then another, then another. Without realizing it, I had begun collecting the truth. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was looking for proof. Over the following weeks, strange things started happening. Daniel became even more aggressive, almost as if he sensed I had stopped fearing him. Every meeting felt like a trap. Every conversation sounded rehearsed. Whenever he gave verbal instructions, I politely asked him to confirm them by email. He hated that. "Don't you trust me?" he asked one afternoon. I smiled for what felt like the first time in months. "I just want to make sure I understand everything correctly." He reluctantly agreed. What he didn't know was that every written confirmation became another piece of a puzzle he couldn't see. Then one Friday evening, as everyone was leaving the office, I accidentally overheard Daniel speaking on the phone behind his closed office door. One sentence made me freeze in the hallway. "Don't worry," he laughed. "If anyone asks, Emma will take the blame. She always does." In that moment, I realized this was no longer about humiliation. He was preparing to sacrifice my career to protect his own. And that was the moment I decided I would never let him write the ending of my story. I walked to my car that evening without remembering how I had gotten there. His words echoed in my head over and over. "Emma will take the blame. She always does." For months, I had convinced myself I was dealing with a cruel manager. Now I realized I was dealing with someone who was planning to ruin my professional reputation to protect himself. That night I made a promise to myself. I would never argue with Daniel again. I would never lose my temper. And I would never give him a reason to call me emotional or unprofessional. From that moment on, I became the quietest person in the office. I documented everything, every email, every meeting invitation, every deadline he changed, every task he reassigned after pretending it had always been my responsibility. I even started keeping a notebook with dates, times, witnesses, and exact conversations. I wasn't collecting gossip anymore. I was building a timeline. The following Monday, Daniel walked into the office wearing his usual arrogant smile. "Emma, my office." Now, I followed him. He tossed a thick folder onto my desk. "I need this client proposal finished by tomorrow morning." I opened it. "This project isn't due until next Friday." "It is now. There are nearly 200 pages. I guess you'll be working late." He walked away before I could answer. I stayed until almost midnight. The cleaning staff had already finished their work by the time I finally sent him the completed proposal. The next morning, he walked into the conference room carrying the same document. "As you can see," he told the executives, "I spent all night fixing this proposal after Emma failed to meet expectations." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He hadn't changed a single page. Not one. The executives thanked him for his dedication. I sat there in complete silence, but inside something had changed forever. I stopped expecting fairness. Instead, I started preparing for the day the truth would matter. A week later, Olivia quietly approached my desk. "I need to show you something." She led me into the empty archive room and closed the door. "I've kept copies of some emails too." My heart skipped a beat. "What emails?" She handed me printed documents. They showed Daniel taking credit for my ideas while privately admitting that I had developed them. In another email, he instructed another manager to leave my name off an award nomination because, in his words, "she's getting too much attention already." I stared at the pages. "I can't believe this." "I can," Olivia replied. "I've watched him do this to people for years." "Why didn't anyone stop him?" "Because everyone was afraid." She looked at me with guilty eyes. Myself included. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I realized I wasn't completely alone. Over the next month, 2 more coworkers quietly came to me. Neither wanted revenge. They simply wanted the truth to survive. One had screenshots of late-night messages ordering impossible deadlines. Another had meeting notes proving Daniel had ignored legal compliance procedures while blaming junior employees whenever problems appeared. Piece by piece, the picture became clearer. Daniel wasn't just humiliating people. He was building his career on other people's work while sacrificing them whenever something went wrong. Then the opportunity he had been waiting for finally arrived. Our company landed its biggest client in years. The regional director announced that whoever led the project successfully would likely receive a major promotion. Daniel wanted that promotion more than anything. Naturally, he made me responsible for almost all the work. For 6 exhausting weeks, I coordinated departments, solved client issues, stayed through weekends, and barely saw my family. Daniel attended only the important meetings. Whenever executives visited, he stood confidently in front of the presentation while I sat quietly taking notes. The client adored the project. Everything was running perfectly, until 3 days before launch. Daniel stormed toward my desk. What did you do? I looked up, confused. What happened? The financial forecast is wrong. It can't be. It is. He slammed printed reports onto my desk. The board is reviewing this tomorrow. I checked the numbers. Someone had changed dozens of figures. Not small mistakes. Massive changes. Changes I had never made. I didn't do this. He leaned closer. Your login made the edits. I felt the blood drain from my face. My login? IT already confirmed it. I immediately called the IT department. The technician hesitated before answering. Yes, the changes came from your account. I wasn't even in the office when these edits were made. I'm not allowed to discuss it further. Something felt terribly wrong. That evening, while everyone else rushed to repair the project, I reviewed my access logs. One detail stood out. The edits had been made while my security badge showed I had already left the building. Someone had accessed my account remotely. But who? The answer came the next morning. As I entered the office, I noticed Daniel using a master access card to enter an empty workstation. He quickly slipped something into his pocket after noticing me. For just a second, our eyes met. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. The smile of someone who believed he had already won. Hours later, I was called into a disciplinary meeting. The regional director, HR, Daniel, and 2 executives were waiting. The atmosphere was ice cold. The director folded his hands. Emma, we're investigating serious misconduct involving confidential financial data. I didn't alter those files. Daniel sighed dramatically. I wanted to believe that too. I turned toward him. Stop lying. He looked almost offended. I'm trying to help you. No. You're trying to bury me. HR interrupted. Emma, please remain professional. Professional. The very people ignoring months of abuse were lecturing me about professionalism. Daniel placed several printed documents on the table. These records clearly show her account made the changes. Everyone looked at me. For one terrifying moment, I thought everything was over. Then I remembered something. The previous week, because Daniel insisted on reviewing my work after hours, I had started forwarding every completed project, along with timestamps and version histories, to my personal archive. Quietly, I opened my laptop. I'd like everyone to look at one file before making any decisions. The room fell silent. I clicked open a document. Then another. And another. Every version carried automatic timestamps proving the files were correct before I left the office each evening. The final corrupted versions appeared only after my recorded departure times. For the first time, Daniel's confident expression disappeared. He hadn't expected me to have a backup trail. But as the executives exchanged uneasy glances, I realized something even bigger. This wasn't enough to expose everything. It would save my job. But it wouldn't end his career. For that, I needed one final piece of evidence. And I had a feeling it was closer than Daniel could possibly imagine. The disciplinary meeting ended without a decision. The executives quietly collected my evidence while Daniel insisted the investigation continue. He still sounded confident, but I noticed something different as we walked out of the room. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at everyone else. For the first time, he was wondering who still believed him. The investigation lasted another week. During that time, nobody was allowed to discuss the case. The office felt colder than ever. Conversations stopped whenever I entered a room. Some people looked at me with sympathy. Others avoided me completely. Daniel acted as though nothing had happened. He laughed in meetings. He complimented executives. He even stopped insulting me. That scared me more than his yelling ever had. People like Daniel were only kind when they thought they were planning something bigger. Then, on Wednesday afternoon, Olivia hurried to my desk. You need to see this. She handed me a small flash drive. Where did you get it? The IT administrator is retiring this month. He heard about the investigation. What does that have to do with this? He spent years backing up server activity. He said he couldn't stay silent anymore. My heart started racing. I plugged the drive into my laptop. Inside were security logs, remote access records, and archived system reports. One file immediately caught my attention. It showed administrator access being used to enter my account after I had already left the office. The user ID attached to that access belonged to Daniel Carter. I stared at the screen. My hands began shaking. He hadn't just blamed me. He had logged into my account himself. But there was more. Another folder contained deleted emails recovered from the company server. Apparently Daniel believed deleting messages erased them forever. He was wrong. One email to another senior manager read, "Don't worry about the financial edits. Once Emma takes responsibility, the promotion should be secure. Another said, she's already lost credibility. HR won't question my version. I couldn't breathe. Every lie, every setup, every humiliation. He had planned it all. The next morning, I requested one final meeting with the investigation committee. Daniel walked into the conference room wearing the same confident smile that had haunted me for months. You wanted another chance? He asked sarcastically. No, I calmly placed the flash drive on the table. I wanted everyone to have the complete story. The regional director looked confused. What is this? Evidence. The IT administrator entered the room a few seconds later. Daniel's smile disappeared. What is he doing here? The administrator sat down quietly. I was asked to explain the server logs. The room became silent. One by one, the files appeared on the large conference screen. Login records, security timestamps, remote access history, deleted email recovery, version comparisons. Every document pointed to the same conclusion. Daniel had entered my account. Daniel had altered company files. Daniel had attempted to blame me. Then came the recovered emails. Nobody spoke as the words appeared on the screen. The regional director slowly removed his glasses. One executive leaned back in complete disbelief. HR looked down at the table without saying a word. Daniel suddenly stood. This is being taken out of context. The IT administrator calmly replied. The logs cannot be taken out of context. They are automatically generated by the system. Daniel pointed toward me. She's manipulating everyone. I finally spoke. No, Daniel. My voice was calm. You manipulated everyone. I looked around the room. For months I thought I was weak because of the way he treated me. I questioned my abilities. I questioned my worth. But the truth is, none of this was ever about my performance. I paused. It was about control. Nobody interrupted. I continued. I stayed late because I cared about this company. I accepted blame because I believed honesty would eventually matter. I kept working because I refused to become the person he wanted me to be. The room remained completely silent. Then the regional director looked directly at Daniel. Is there anything you'd like to say? For the first time since I had met him. Daniel had no answer. 3 days later, the company announced the results of the investigation. Daniel's employment was terminated for misconduct, abuse of authority, falsifying company records, and attempting to frame another employee. The promotion he had chased for years disappeared overnight. His professional reputation collapsed even faster. Several former employees contacted the company after hearing the news and shared nearly identical experiences. The investigation expanded. Policies changed. Anonymous reporting systems were introduced. Managers received mandatory leadership and workplace conduct training. HR was completely reorganized. For the first time in years, people felt safe enough to speak honestly. A week later, the CEO asked to meet with me personally. I owe you an apology, he said. No, I answered gently. You owe it to every employee who stayed silent because they believed nobody would listen. He nodded slowly. You're right. He thanked me for refusing to give up. A month later, I was offered a leadership position. I accepted only after making one request. I don't want an office with a bigger window. The CEO smiled. What do you want? I want every promotion to be based on documented performance, not personal influence. It will be. Leading my own team felt strange at first. Whenever someone made a mistake, I remembered how it felt to stand alone while everyone watched. So instead of humiliation, we solved problems together. Instead of fear, we built trust. Months later, Olivia walked into my office carrying 2 coffees. You know, she laughed, this place feels completely different now. It is. You really changed everything. I smiled. No, I looked through the glass wall at employees laughing together during lunch. The truth changed everything. That evening, as I packed my bag to go home, I opened the drafts folder on my laptop. The email I had written months earlier was still there. The one I thought would end Daniel's career. I read it one last time. Then I smiled. I never needed to send it. Because in the end, it wasn't one angry email that destroyed his career. It was every lie he had ever told, every person he had ever used, and every piece of truth he believed would stay buried forever. I quietly deleted the draft, turned off my computer, and walked out of the office without looking back. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't leaving work carrying fear. I was leaving with something Daniel could never steal from me again. My dignity.